Hey guys, welcome back to the Dev Marketer channel. Today we're working on part number 2 on mastering WebSockets with Laravel. Now in this video, we're going to be we're continuing the series and we're going to be focusing on building the API for our comments. So this is going to allow us to get all the comments for a specific blog post, and then we're also going to create an API endpoint to store or save a new comment on a blog post. So the reason we're doing this is because in order to create this real-time live commenting engine that we've talked about, we need to have some sort of API in order to get and save comments via AJAX, okay? Because we don't want to do this with normal page requests because then it's not live. So we need to have a way to do this as an element of our API. So we're going to be creating a small API that allows us to do this. It's only 2 routes. It gets all of the comments for a specific post is our first one, and the other one's going to be a post request in order to save a new comment on a blog post. And those are the 2 routes we're going to focus on. We'll create API endpoints for both of those. We'll start storing comments in the database, and then that's going to give us, and then I'll also move on and we'll do the front end in this video as well to start displaying all those comments to the users. Now, in the next video, we're going to actually put everything together where we actually integrate WebSockets into this, but we're going to get the comments actually working in this video. So that's the goal. We create the API. We're going to then actually go over, set up a Vue object, and we're going to get all of the comments for a specific post, display them to the user, and then we're also going to learn how to save a comment via the API and then update that on the user's page as well. Okay, so there won't be any real-time stuff here, but it still will be doing APIs and AJAX for all of it. So let's start off by actually creating the comments API, and then we'll move over to the front end and start implementing those new API endpoints that we created. So to do that, the first thing we need to do is we actually don't have a way to store comments in the database. So the first thing I want to do is I want to create a model, controller, and a migration. Okay. Now all of that's to store comments. So the first thing I like to do is I like to come in and do a make model. And when we make the model, let's make the comment model so we can store those models, and we can store those comments. We have a model to interact with the database, and you can also pass in a new flag called migration. So while we're making the model, we can say, oh, also make a migration for our new model. And let's go ahead and click enter. It creates the model and a migration to go along with it. So now let's jump over into the code and let's work on this migration. Let's start storing the information in the database and then work on the model and move from there. So up here into database migrations, we've got our new migration. It's a create comments table migration. Sounds great. And here's the setup, the schema in order to create this table. We have an ID and we've got our timestamps. This is going to be pretty good. We are going to want to store our text. This is the main text for the comments. So they're going to write a bunch of text. That's the comment that they want to store. We need to save that. And so we'll store it here as a text column. We'll call it body. Now that's really all it is. The only other thing, if you think about it, there's 2 pieces of information we need to know about the comment. We need to know which blog post it belongs to, and we also need to know which user wrote the comment. Okay, so let's go ahead and fit those in. We'll just create relationships in order to do that. If you think about them, there has one-to-many relationships. You have one user has many comments, one blog post has many comments, and then vice versa. Many comments belong to one blog post, many comments belong to one user. So it's one-to-many relationship for both of them. So let's create those 2 relationships here. We're going to create an integer column. We're going to call it user ID. This is going to store the ID for the user who wrote the blog post. I like to make it just unsigned because you'll never have a positive user ID or a post ID. And so here we go. We're going to just go ahead and sign those 2 elements, post ID and user ID, and that's going to establish that relationship. And then we got the main body and of course timestamps and our own IDs. That's good there. Let's go ahead and save that migration. I think that's everything we need for migrations, and we can move up to the model. So up here in the model, let's go ahead and set up a few things. Let's first of all I'm in the comment model. Let's first of all set up the mass assignable fields, the ones that are fillable. So let's go ahead and do that here. So we'll just set up fillable equals, and we'll say body, user ID, and post ID. In fact, we actually don't, it's only really body. Okay, so let's go ahead and set that up. And then next, it should be, we actually want to define the relationships. So let's go ahead and just define it. So we have post, and we'll just say return this belongs to, and we'll say app/post. Okay, so that defines that first relationship. Now let's copy this, and we also need a post with user, which is going to be the exact same thing. It belongs to a user model. Okay, that's it for that relationship. Now we can actually go through and define the inverse of these relationships. Technically these are the inverse, but we're going to find the first part of the other part of it. So in post, we need to tell it that a post, public function, a post can have many comments. So let's go ahead and define that here. Return this has many, and app/comment. There we go. Let's go ahead and copy that because this is the exact same thing in the next model, the user model. The user can have many comments as well. So let's just define comments here. It's a has many for comments. We don't need to do anything. So there we go. Save all of those. Our models are now done. So now that we got our models done, our migrations done, the next step would be to create some routes. So let's come over to our routes. We know these are API routes. We're going to go to routes api.php and start defining those routes here. So we have two routes. We need to do a get request that gets all of the comments for a specific post. And then we need to do a post request that passes in the new comment and then stores the comment in the database. So those are the two that we need to do. Now, when we're just getting all of the comments for a specific blog post, we want anybody to have the ability to get all of the comments for a blog post. You don't need to be logged in to read comments, okay? So we want that to be available to everybody. However, when someone saves a new blog post or a new comment, we want them to be logged in order to do that. The reason we do that is because we want to create that relationship between the comment and the user. So we need to know, they need to be logged in order for us to establish that relationship. If they're not logged in, then we won't have a user to attach the comment to. So that's why we need that authentication. So you can see here, we already have some route middleware for auth API. This does API authentication for us. And so it's going to authenticate the user and basically log them in on a one session basis, okay, because this is sessionless. And so that's what we're going to be using here. So what we can do is we can grab this middleware and let's create a group. Okay, so now we created a group, just create the anonymous closure here. And so now we can go ahead and make our two routes. Our first one is a get request to get all of the comments for a blog post. And that does not need authentication. So we can do it outside of the group here. So we'll just do posts / and then let's pass in the post ID. And then we'll just say /comments to get all the comments. And we'll send that over to the comment controller and the index function. Okay, pretty basic. Let's go ahead and just copy this here because it's very similar and paste it down here. This time we're going to paste it inside of this API authentication middleware group. This is going to be the one that is a post request in order to save a new comment. And we want to get the post ID here. And then we want to, we'll just say /comment, since it's a one new comment. So we'll say posts / the post ID / comment. That's going to save a new comment. And then we'll just send that to comment controller. But this time we'll send it to the store method to store a new comment. Okay, this one has a authentication. This one does not. That's it for our routes. Now we can actually head over to the controller that we've been talking about, that comment controller, but unfortunately we don't have it yet. So let's go ahead and create it. PHP artisan make controller. We can just make a basic controller. Call it the comment controller, which is what I was kind of tentatively calling it. And there we go. Now we should have it created successfully. Let's take a look at it. Here's our new controller, comment controller, and here it is. So now we can actually start working on the comment controller. Okay, so now that we have that, let's go ahead and set it up. So we have two actions we need to work with. So we have our public function index, and then we've got our store method. Those are the only two that we need. So let's set those up. And now we can go through and kind of fill them in. So for the index method, this is easy. We just need to grab the current post. We know the post because it's inside of the URL. And so we can bring that in here at the top. So let's do that. So we'll grab post from the URL, and we can actually type hint it as a post if we call in up here. So we'll say app post, and that way it comes in as an actual post record, which will be kind of nice. Okay, then from here, we can just tell it to return this back to the user, and we will say grab the post comments because we established that relationship. So this is going to get all of the comments for a specific post. Okay. Now we can actually take this a little bit further. We can tell it to also bring in the user information. Since we know we're going to want the user's information, we're going to want to display that with the comments. We're going to want the user's name and stuff like that. So we want to go ahead and eager load that. So that's what we're doing here. And then last but not least, we can go ahead and say latest, and that's going to go ahead and actually sort them with the newest one at the top. Okay. And then finally, because we're using query builder, we need to use get at the end to actually get the request. Okay. So that's going to get everything and return it back to the user. Now, one last thing we want to do is we are going to want this to be returned as JSON. So let's go ahead and just wrap this whole thing in response JSON. There we go. And finish it up here. Okay, so now it's going to go get all those records here, and then it's going to return it as JSON as part of the response. Okay. Now we want to go ahead and store a new comment for a user. So we're going to want to do a few things up here. We're still going to want that post because we want to know which post was in the URL. So we can do that here. Let's type int it as post again. So we'll have post available to us. And then we're also going to want access to the request. So let's go ahead and set that up as well. So we'll just say request. That's going to give us that request object, and we'll have access to that now. Okay, so now what we want to do is let's go ahead and create the new comment. Okay, so they're going to pass everything into this request variable, all the information about the comment. We want to go ahead and create that comment and then save it in the database. So let's do that. So we're going to create a new comment. We'll say comment equals, and we'll just take this post object that we have up here so that we can create that relationship. We'll just say posts, comments, and create. And this is going to go through and establish that relationship between comments and the post. So we're creating a new comment, but it's already linking it to post. Okay. And then from there, we can go ahead and just pass in the other things we need. So we have a body column. So let's go ahead and pass the body column in, and we can just get that from the request. And then the other item would be the user ID. We'll just pass that in as well. So we'll say the user ID comes from the currently logged in user, because we know the user is currently logged in, because if they got this far, they're authenticated. Okay. So we're just going to get their current ID for the user that's logged in. So there we go. That's basically it. The post actually the post ID actually comes from the URL, and then this gets it from the logged in user, so you can't really mess around. Now, one other thing you might want to do is the body. You might want to throw that through a validator. Just make sure it's valid body. You can run a validator up here. I'm not going to worry about it for this demo, but that's what you would normally do. You would want to validate the body, make sure it's clean and stuff like that. Okay. Now here at the bottom, what we'd want to do is we're going to want to return the comment back into the request, and we can actually just cast that to JSON here, and that way it gets returned as JSON. Okay, now there is one other thing that you will run into, which is that we're not going to, when we have this comment information, we're passing in the ID of the user, but we won't actually have the user's information with us. So what I like to do is I would actually just go ahead and grab this again. We'll just create a new comment object, and we'll write over it, and we'll just grab a new comment, and we'll say comment where the ID is, or you can do comment find, but either one, where it is equal to the ID of the one we just saved. So we're going to go get that information, and then we will eager load our user information, and then we will just grab the first object like that. Okay. And then we can go ahead and return that comment back. Okay. That's it. That's basically all you need for the backend code now. So now we should have two new, if we go ahead and clear this out and run PHP artisan route list, it should show us all of our new routes. And we should now have, here it is, posts, or not posts, Oh yeah, sorry, posts. We need, here's our API. So API/posts/post/comment, and then API/post/post, the post ID, and then the comments. So that's it. That's basically everything we need. We now have access to 2 API endpoints, and when we pass in new comment information, it'll store it in the database and then pass us back the value that was saved, okay? And then with our index function, we can actually just get a JSON payload with all of the comments inside of it. So that's really all that we need. That's kind of the first part of this video. Now to finish up this video, what I want to do is I want to now start moving on to the front end. We're done with the back end. Let's now move on to the front end and start displaying comments to on the blog posts on the front end. So let's go ahead and do that. Now before we do that, what I want to do is see where we're at with our application right now. So I want to come over here. In fact, we'll open up Chrome real quick, because Chrome has slightly better developer tools. So, and we don't have access to the Vue developer tools, Vue.js developer tools on Firefox. Firefox is actually my preferred browser, the new Firefox, the Firefox Quantum. I really like Firefox Quantum, so it's become my primary browser, but I always have to switch to Chrome when I'm developing because Chrome is still better for, mainly because of the Vue.js Vue.js developer tools are only available on Chrome, at least that I'm aware of. I should probably look that up, but at least they only used to be. Okay, so now let's go to our new application, which is called Echo. So we'll go to echo/test. Go ahead and load that. Let's go ahead and log in as a user just to see what this looks like. We're going to need to get a user's information real quick. So go to Echo real quick, grab a user. We'll grab this first user and paste in their email address, and their password is secret. And remember, login. Okay, there we go. Now we're logged in. Now let's go to a blog post. So we'll say posts/10 to go to blog post number 10. And here's the blog post. So here's the title. You can see it's published. It's got the date it was created, and then here's the body of the blog post. Okay. Down here we have a place to leave comments. So what we want to do in this video is I've already created the UI for you. All you need to do is we want to basically take whenever they've typed something in here and they click save comment, we want to take the contents of this text field and we want to send it to the server, that new API endpoint that we created, and then we want to update that down in here in the comment feed. So here's the comment feed down below. This is what the comments look like when we have them. Now there's only one comment right now and it's just hard coded. These aren't actually getting the comments from the database. These are just hard coded on this template page. Okay? And that's it. That's basically it. So what we want to do in the next parts of this video here is we're going to go through and we want to load all the comments when we first load the page. We want to display all the comments. So we need to go to the server, get that new API endpoint we had, get all the comments for a blog post. It's going to return it back to us, and we want to display it down here just like these are. Then after that, what we want to do is we want to go ahead and submit. After they fill in this text area and they click save comment, we want to submit that to the database, or to the that post API request, so that it saves it in the database and then returns it back to us, and then we'll display the new comment at the top of the news feed, the comments feed that we have down here. Okay, so that's the goal. That's why I wanted to show you guys what it looks like right now. I've already written the front end, like the HTML. We just need to fill it in now. Okay, so this is currently being hard coded. We're going to want to make this dynamic by what the actual comments are, and we're going to do all of that with Vue.js. So let's go ahead. Let's head over to the front end of the website. So resources, views, and all of this is going to happen under posts.show. That's the page that actually shows the blog posts. Okay, so here we are. You can see everything. We don't really need to focus on this. This is where it actually shows the blog post. Laravel's handling all that. We don't need to worry about that. Here we have our comments. So this is the comment field that I showed you guys. And then down here is this media object right here. This is a single comment. So from here to here, this is all that one comment that we saw here. That's all this stuff. Okay? And then this is the comments text box area with the button and everything. Okay? So first things first, let's go through and let's set up our Vue.js instance for this page, and we'll set it up so when the page first loads, we go get all the comments for this blog post and we fill them in here at the bottom of the page so you can read all the comments. So the first thing we need to do is create that Vue.js object. So let's go ahead and create a new section here called scripts. And inside of here, create a script tag. And then inside of here, we're going to establish our new Vue.js object. So we will create it here called, you can create a constant actually, and you'll just say constant app equals new Vue. And there we go. So now we've got the beginning of it. Now let's go ahead and create an element, and we're going to attach this to the ID of app, which basically is our entire web page, which is good. And then down here, we're going to need some data properties, okay? Now the data properties are going to be the properties that we have access to within Vue. So we're going to want to store a few important elements. First of all, we're going to want all of the comments that are on the page. This is going to allow us to add new comments to this array, remove it, do whatever. So we're going to need to know, we're going to need Vue to handle all of the comments. So we're creating an object here to represent all of the comments that this blog post has. Next, we're going to need to store the information about the blog post. So we're going to already have this information basically because it comes in up here at the top. You can see we have the title, the updated at, the published. We're just going to want to grab this information and just make sure that Vue has access to it. So we'll grab that. The other element we're going to want is all the user information. Okay, so again, all the user information is available to us. Let's just put that here so Vue has access to it. And the last part is we're going to want to actually start tracking the value of this text area here so that we don't need to, we'll always have the value of this text area so that we know what comment they're trying to leave. We're going to create two-way binding between this text area and a field down here. So let's create another field called comment box. We'll just set that equal to an empty string for right now. All right, but that's going to be it. So those are kind of the four elements that we need to track here at the beginning for our data objects. Now there is this, let's go ahead and set up a couple of these first. So comments is going to be a little tricky because we have to do the API request first in order to get all the comments. But we could, you could actually load this right away if you wanted to pass this in as the, if you wanted to pass it in at the top of the page, you could just bring it in from Laravel. So that's another option. I'm going to show you guys the other way, but that's another way you can do it. Just like what we're going to do with these two. All right, now comment box is going to link to this text area up here. So let's just go ahead really quick and just create that binding between those two because that's really easy. So all we need to do is up in this text area, we can just add a v model, v-model, and we'll just say comment box. Okay, now anything that goes in that text area will be inside of this, this data object, and anytime we change the data object, it'll reflect up into the text area as well. So you got two-way binding there, so that's really good. Now for post, we just want all the post information. So this is pretty easy. We can just set this up, do curly bang bang, so we get escaping there. And then inside of here, we'll just say post, grab that post object from Laravel, and we'll just say to JSON. Just to tell it to cast it to JSON. And then we'll have a JSON version of all the post information stored right into this post object. Super easy, right? Now let's do the same thing for users. So curly bang bang, get that in there. And then we can do auth user to get the currently logged in user. And we'll do the same thing. We'll just cast them to JSON. And now you'll have a JSON version of all the users information that was on the page. Now this will cause one potential problem is if a user is not logged in, then when we try to call auth user, it'll return an error. So that's the one thing you got to be careful of when you do this. So because this page is accessible to the public, that means that it is possible for someone who's not logged in to view this page. You don't want to throw an error when they do that. So instead what we're going to do is we're going to tell it to check first if they're logged in. If they are logged in, then let's go ahead and grab their user information and then cast it to JSON. And if they're not logged in, if they're not logged in, then we're just going to tell it to pass in null. Okay, so then user will just be equal to null if they're not logged in. Okay, so there we go. That's it for our data. That's everything we really need to get kind of set up with that. Now the next part of our Vue is creating a few methods. So we're obviously going to need to be able to create a method to get all of the blog posts or all the comments for this blog post. And then we're also going to need to make a method to post a new comment when it's submitted. We want to post that comment to the server and then get the response back. All right, so there's kind of two methods we need to work on here. So let's go ahead and create those. First, we'll start with getComments. That's going to get a new comment from the, or it's going to get all of the comments from the server, from the NAPI request. So we'll do getComments, and then the other one I want to do here is postComment. So we'll just do post a single comment like that. Okay, let's fill this in. getComments. Again, we're doing an API request. All we really need to do, send an API request to that API endpoint we created, and we want to take that information and we want to basically, we're going to expect to get a payload back. The response back will be a JSON object with all of the comments for this blog post. So all we really need to do is send an API request over, request all the comments. It's already going to come back to us in JSON, and then we can just save that JSON up here under this comments data object. So that's actually a really easy concept. So we'll just use Axios to do this. It's a GET request, so let's go ahead and set up a GET request. We're going to send it to API slash posts slash, and then we need to go ahead and get the post ID that we're currently on. But we should have the post ID up in this fancy little object we have. So it's pretty accessible to us. So what we can do is we can concatenate, and we'll just say this.post.id, and that'll get the post ID from this object up here. So that's pretty cool. And then from there, what we can do is we can also do slash comments, because we need to have, that's the end part of the URL. Okay, and then that's going to go send that GET request to that URL endpoint. Now, if you want, if you're using ES6, you can do template syntax. So what we'll do here is we'll just do this. We can get rid of all the concatenation. So that what I just showed you will work, but I just want to show you the other method that's a little better. Okay, and that's this. Okay, so then we can use, these are backticks. These aren't quotes, these are backticks. And this will work in ES6. So this is the templating syntax. You're just grabbing this, and then once it recognizes this $ curly, then it will basically run this as if it's actual executable JavaScript. In our case, we're just grabbing a variable. So pass that in, and then we have slash comments at the end. So this will work too. Either one will work. This is cleaner though. I like this a little better. All right, so we're gonna go ahead and send a request off. Then when that comes back, we're gonna go ahead and fill in our promise. So we'll grab our response, and let's go ahead and tell it what to do after we get the response back. So this is the promise here. So this is gonna go ahead and run, and then as soon as we get the response, then this will run. Okay, now what do we wanna do inside of here? We want to basically just take the response that we get back, that JSON payload that we get back, we want to set it equal to this comments up here. So that's a really easy concept. So we'll just do this comments equals response.data. Okay, now keep in mind the response contains all sorts of information like your status codes and stuff like that. So you need to do response.data. That's the actual like what got back from the server. If you just do response, you have a whole bunch of other information about the request that came back, which is useful to have. But when you actually just want the payload, what was actually the data that came back, then you do response.data, which is a portion of this response object. Okay, so this .comments equals response.data. That's going to mean that now this comments object has all the comments that in JSON format that this blog post should have. Okay, that's basically it. And then if we wanted, you should have this. You should have a catch as well, and you can just run a quick, tell it what to do if there's a problem. So this should be pretty simple. For us right now, we're just going to log the error to the console. So if we have an error, we'll just log it to the console. You normally would want to do something, create a little pop-up or a little alert or something so the user knows that something went wrong. That's what you would normally want to do instead of just output this to the console. But this will be good for our demonstration purposes. Okay, so that's basically it for getComments. That's it to make getComments work. Now let's talk about postComments. So we want to take and save a comment. So keep in mind someone's already typed into the text box. They click save comment. What do we want to do? All right, well, we're going to take the information from that text area, which is available up here in comment box. We're going to grab that comment box data, and we're going to pass that in to our store method on the server via the API endpoint we created. And we're going to do that as a post request. So it's just very similar to what we did up here. It's just we need to do it as a post request, but it's still very similar. Let's go ahead and set that up now. So axios.post this time, that sends a post request instead of a get request. And let's set that API endpoint. Now I'm just going to skip over and do the template syntax that we did before. So we'll just do /API/posts/ and then we're going to grab that this.post.id, and then we're going to do /comment. Okay? And then that's going to go ahead and set that up. Now as a second parameter, because this is remember post requests and get requests are slightly different with Axios. So here, that was all we needed to do for the get request. For the post request, we need to do a second parameter. And this second parameter is going to be the object that contains everything we pass in with the request, okay? So let's go ahead and set that up, and let's tell it what to pass in. So what do we want to pass in? What is needed by the request in order to save that comment? First of all, the body, right? We need the body, to put in the comment, so fill in that body column. We need that. Then we're also going to need to know the user's ID, and then we're going to need to know the post's ID in order to save all of that. And everything else is basically automatic. The user ID, we don't really need to pass that in actually, because we can just get it it's actually better to just get it by the currently logged in user. So instead of passing in the user's ID, what we actually want to pass in is their API token so that the user can be authenticated, and then we'll get the ID based on their authentication. Okay, so we'll grab their API token. That's going to be the better thing to pass in. And then we also need the body. We don't need to pass in the post ID because the post ID is already up in the URL. So that's already being passed in through the URL. So we really just need the body and the API token. So let's go ahead and set those two elements up. So first start off with API token. And we'll grab that API token, make sure to do the underscore token, and then we'll do API token, and we can get the API token from the user's information that's up here. So we just do this.user.api token. It should be available to us. So that makes that really easy. Then the final thing is our body, is the second thing that we want to pass in, which is easy as well because we should have it inside of this comment box parameter. So up here we have comment box, so we should want that available here as well. There we go, that's it for post. Now, after that goes ahead and sends, we want to tell it that when the response comes back, what to do. So we're going to grab that response, fat arrow function. It's good to do fat arrow functions because if you don't, then you won't have access to the this parameter inside of your then, because that's technically a new function. So make sure to do fat arrow functions here instead of an anonymous function. All right. A lot of people will do, like this is an anonymous function. So don't do it like this. If you do, it'll work, but you won't have access to the this parameter. So you'd have to do app. Well, you'd have to, yeah, just do this. This is much easier. Okay. All right, so once again, fat arrow function, and then inside of that, what we want to tell it to do is what to do after the response comes back. So remember, we send off the request gets saved in the database, then the response that comes back is the comment that was just saved, right? So what do we want to do? Well, we want to take that comment that was just saved, and we want to add it to the top of the comments array. That's basically what we want to do, because now the comments are different. It's all the comments that were there before plus the new one we just submitted. So we want to take the response and we want to add that response back to the top of the comments array. That's what we want to do. So let's do it. So now inside of then we'll do this.comments to set this.comments. And what we want to do is add it to the beginning of that array. So now it's at the top of it. So what we can do is we can actually run a method called unshift. Unshift will put something to the top of an array and push everything else down. That's what unshift does. And that's exactly what we want to do. Here we just want to grab response.data. Last but not least, we want to take that comment box, this.comment box, and set it equal to an empty string. So why do we want to do that? Well, because if you wrote a comment and you click submit, we want to then clear out the comment text, right? So it's clear again. So because there's two-way binding between the comment box variable and the text area, by just clearing out the value of comment box, it's going to clear out the value of the text area as well because of that two-way binding. Now make sure to do this afterwards because we still require the information up here. Okay, so that's why we're doing it down here, that we clear it out. Last but not least is the catch. So if something goes horribly wrong, what do we want to do? Well, we would just want to function. Let's just log the error again. Okay, same spiel as last time. Don't do that in production, but that's good to do for right now. Okay, that should be everything. Hopefully, don't have any syntax errors, and yeah, that should be good. Okay, now the next thing we want to do is we want to make sure that getComments gets ran as soon as the page loads. So the question is, how do you set that up so that it runs as soon as the page loads? Well, we can actually create another thing up here called mounted, and mounted is a hook that runs at a certain life cycle of the application, and it's when the entire Vue instance has mounted. What mounted means is that it's like all set up and ready to go, and it's the next tick in the next JavaScript tick will basically be the Vue application will be accepting inputs and doing everything. Mounted happens right before that tick, and so it's the best time. That means the rest of the Vue application is ready to actually do something, and it's one tick away from actually doing the stuff that it's supposed to do. That's the perfect time to do anything you want to do right at the beginning of an application loading. So that's what mounted does. And so in this mounted, it's going to run automatically when it hits that life cycle, and when that life cycle point right after it loads basically, and we want to tell it what to do when it mounts. We just want to say, hey, go run this method. That's all we're going to say. So we're going to say this.getComments, and that's it. And now it's going to run and get those comments. And then we should have, if we go look at this now, Firefox, or no, Chrome, let's just now open up our inspector, and we're going to go over to Vue here, and there's no objects. Okay, let's refresh. And in our root object now, you can see our comment box is empty and comments are also empty. Well, that's because there's no comments in our database. So let's go through and create a new comment real quick. Well, we haven't ran our migrations yet, so let's do that. PHP artisan migrate to get that comments table. And now we have a comments table. Let's go to our comments table and create a new comment. Okay, so there we go. I created a comment manually. So now, if we come over here and refresh, we should have a comment, hopefully. There we go. So now inside of our comments array, we have one item in the array, which is the comment that we just created. This is our first comment. We've got all the information here, the post ID, the user ID, and we have all the user's information for this specific user, okay? So that's everything that we need now to start filling in to actually display the comments. It's on the page in the data, but it's not visible. It's not actually visible. So we need to now take the data we've got here and make it visible over here. So to do that, let's just scroll up. We know all the comments are inside of this comments array, okay? So when we actually display our comments, this is where we display the comments. This whole thing is one comment. So what we want to do is this media object, we want to loop through this media and create as many duplicates of this media object as there are comments. So we can just create a loop, and we'll just say v4, and we'll just say comment in comments. All right, and what this means is this is actually going to basically loop through the entire comments array, and every iteration is going to save that current iteration as comment. So now we'll have access to this comment variable, which represents the current comment of our loop. Okay, so then every time we have another comment, this media will get duplicated, and we can go through it once again. Okay, so now what we can do is here we've got our avatar, basically. We don't have avatars stored in our database, but if you did, you could come up here and you could do something like, we could do comment.user.avatar. Okay, and that would get their avatar URL or something. We don't have avatars stored, so we're just gonna have to just use this placeholder image for right now, but that's normally what you would do. Now down here we've got, for example, John Doe said. That's the user's name. So we want to go ahead and make this dynamic. Let's fill in the user's name for the current comment that we're working with. Okay, so the way we do that is we do @ curly curly, and then we'll just do comment.user.name. That's going to get the name of the user that wrote the current comment. There we go. Now for here, we want to make this dynamic. So we actually want to get the body of the comment. So once again, we will just do @ curly curly, and we'll do comment.body to get the current body. And then finally down here, we've got our date. Let's just set the date. We will do comment.createdAt to display when they created that comment. That's it. Let's save that and go take a look in the browser. I'm going to refresh. And here we go. You can see now, this is our first comment, and we have the date that we set up. We've got the guy's name, Fred Baz, which is user ID number 1. So user ID is Fred Baz. So that works out good. And that's everything. If we want to go ahead and duplicate this row, let's just duplicate it. We'll just say this time it's user 2, and we'll say this is our second comment. And now we'll have a second comment. Let's just create it. But they're both for blog post number 10. So now if we refresh, now we've got 2 comments. So we have the first one and the second one, 2 different people. The dates were the same, but if we change the dates, they would reflect. The created as the one that, so let's say this was the 18th. And now refresh, and this one now is on the 18th, and that one's on the 15th. So notice they flipped, and this one was originally at the top, but now because this one is more recent, it shows up at the top, okay? So everything's working good, and if we look at our view object, we have both of these as an array. Here's our second comment first, and then our first comment after that. Okay, now let's go ahead and test out the creating a new blog or a new comment. Actually, this won't work yet because we haven't linked it to run when we click the save comment button. So now let's go through, and when we click this button, let's tell it to run the function postComment, which is actually going to go through and save that comment. So up here at the top where we've got that button, let's tell it to click. When we click, we click.prevent, so it prevents default. Tell it to run postComment like that. Okay, so now we're telling it that when this button gets clicked, we want to prevent the default action, which is to submit and request and refresh the page. We don't want it to do that. And so we're preventing that action, telling it to just run whatever's inside of the postComment function instead. Okay, so we'll go down here, run all of this, and then hopefully it'll save the comment and then unshift it to the beginning of our array, which means because it's right inside of our comments array, and these comments are dynamically pulled from the comments array, it should automatically show it on screen once it saves. So now let's try that once more. I'm going to refresh. We're at our first comment here. We got 2 comments here. Let's now submit a third comment. This is the third comment. And do an exclamation point. Click save. Okay, we didn't work. So let's check why. Let's come over to console. I actually think I know why all of a sudden. You can see we got a 500 error. Let's click it. And you can see here, controllers auth not found. This is inside of our comment controller. Let's go over to our comment controller real quick. That's an actual server-side error that was causing that. So inside of our comment controller, what we did is we called auth ID up here, but we don't actually have access to auth. So we need to come up here and say use auth. Also, while we're here, we should probably make sure we have it. So post, we have request, we have, what else? Are we calling something else? I can't remember if we were called comments. I don't see comment on here. Oh yeah, comment right here. So we need to also import that. So use app comment. Okay, the other thing I think we're gonna need to do is we do need to make sure user ID is mass assignable, because that's what I'm doing here. We're mass assigning it. So we're gonna wanna do that. So let's head back over to the comment model and just add user ID here so that it's assignable. And now I think everything should work because we have our user ID, we're getting the current ID. I was afraid of mass assigning that, but I realize now it's actually okay because we're getting the currently logged in user. So it's not actually really mass assignable from the real sense of it. So it's okay to do it the way we've got it set up. Okay, so that's now going to work. I think we should be good. Let's go back to our application and test it. Okay, so let's refresh. Okay, so we're back over here. Refresh the page, checking everything out. Inside of our view detector, in our inspector, we've got 2 comments, the second one and the first one. And then our comment box is empty. Everything else looks good. We have the post information and the user information here. Okay, down here we've got our 2 comments. So now let's try it out. So now let's come over here. We're gonna say this is the third and final comment. and click save. And there we go. So now it says it showed up down here. And if we look over here into our view object, we now have a third object. There's 3 of them. But of course, we need to look at the top object is now our third comment. And the first one's now, or this one's now pushed down 1, and that's pushed down 1 even lower. And you can see how it immediately showed the new comment up here at the top, just like that. There we go. So now we're able to save all of these comments. Everything appears to be working. It doesn't look like we have any problems. So again, if we just take a look at it again, the 4th comment for post 10 and click save. And again, it shows now the 4th comment right there at the top of all the other ones because this one is more recent than the other ones. All right. And then it clears it out and we're good to go. So there we go, guys. That is basically everything we have. We set up all the comments for our application. We set up the API. We set up everything. We're done with that. Okay. So that's kind of the way that one worked. That one took a while. That took some time, but we got through it, and hopefully that all makes sense. Now, none of that had to do with WebSockets, but in the next video, we're going to tie WebSockets into it. We're actually, when you now save the comment, when I click Save Comment, it's going to go to the server, save the comment, but then when the server sends us back the response saying, yep, it successfully saved, you want the server to also then go out and let Pusher know, hey, a new comment just posted. Let everybody know that's watching post 10 right now. Let them all know about the new comment. Here's the comment data. And then Pusher will then pass it down to everyone else that's looking at that information. Okay, so that's kind of the goal of the next video. And by the end of the next video, we'll have a working WebSocket based live commenting system just like this. So just like how when we click save comment, it automatically showed the new comment there, we're gonna see the exact same thing happen, but when other people submit comments. So it's pretty cool stuff, but at the next video, we're really gonna start mastering those WebSockets, all right? So thanks so much for tuning in, guys. If you watched all the way through the video, good on you, and I will see you guys in the next and 3rd installment of this series.